Welcome back to Season 2, Episode 2 of the TURD Podcast, also known as the Trail Ultrarunning Race Directors Podcast. I'm your host, Shalini Bhajjan, and today I'm excited to welcome the elusive John Storkamp, founder and race director of Rocksteady Running, based in Minnesota. So let's dive in. Welcome to the podcast.
Well, thanks so much for having me and thinking enough about me and our events here in Minnesota to invite me on your podcast. I think it's really cool that you're kind of exploring the sport from a little bit different lens. So kudos to you.
Well, I appreciate it, and thanks for making the time to talk to me. So I'm going to dive right in and ask you, who is John?
So I listened to a couple of your other episodes so far, specifically because I was really interested in who you had on. So I heard you ask this question. And that's kind of you almost stumped Ian Torrance on it.
Yeah.
Flustered him a little bit. I don't know how many word answer you were looking for with this one, but I know it could come from any different direction. But God, who is John? Spiritual being having a human experience. That would be first and foremost. But I'm a father to my daughter, husband to my wife, Sherry, son, family member, friend, above all else. And then really fortunate to get to do a lot of really cool things in running and on trails that, allow me to interact with a lot of neat people and a lot of neat activities. Yeah.
Talk to me a bit about your background. You grew up in Minnesota. Is that where you're originally from? Where'd you go to school? And how long have you been in the area? And a little bit about your real life profession.
Yeah, I was born and raised in Hastings, Minnesota, and I still live in the same town.
Sure.
Take up residence in the northern part of our state for a good part of the year as well, specifically in relation to some races that we have in the northern part of Minnesota, but where I'm spent a lot of my time is kind of in the south central part of the state. Live just a few miles down the road from my parents and my in-laws, and my wife fits the same bill. So yeah, we're kind of hometowners. Yeah. So we split our time between a couple of different places and travel a little bit around the country and spend some time down in the Southwest for a portion of the year too, as well.
Yeah. You mentioned daughter. How old is she? And
26-year-old adult human.
Behaving?
Yeah, she's doing awesome. Yeah, she's navigating all the craziness as well as anyone else could be. So yeah, light of my life, brilliant human. Awesome person, lives not too far away from me and has her own life going and her own things that she's engaged with, but really fortunate to be able to see her with a lot of frequency and spend time together.
And your wife, as I was kind of reading through some of the notes, Sherry, is that correct?
Correct.
How long have you guys been married, and where'd you meet? Has running been a part of her life as well?
Yeah, so Sherry and I have been married for, I'm going to say 21. So every answer I'm going to give you that has a date or a year is going to be like within a margin of error of 2 years. So if you ask me, what year did you run your first marathon? So I'm even going to do that with how long we've been married, because her and I, it's a running joke, like we never seem to be able to pull those dates together either. But We've been married for, it's either 21 or 22 years. Like I said, she was born and raised in the same hometown. She went to high school with my brother. And then tying in like with running, like you asked about and what the premise of the podcast is, the town we're from is kind of a smaller town. Like when we were kids, there was 18,000 people, and it's bigger than that now. Really strong running tradition and history in our hometown. People were, there was a family and different people doing marathons all the way back in the early 70s. And so there's this real running history and running culture. So coincidentally, like Sherry's mother was a marathoner, prolific marathoner, had even run an ultra like way, way back. So yeah, it just kind of runs through our community and like with people we know. So Sherry was, a recreational runner and running marathons, and just as I was. So yeah, one of the things we have in common, she's not running as much anymore, but then again, for all intents and purposes, I'm probably not running as much as I used to either. So as life gets busier and more complicated all the time, it seems.
Sure. And what does she do for a living? And you? I mean, I'm assuming Rocksteady is not your full-time gig, is it?
It's not, but it's, and it's ebbed and flowed over the years with how much time and bandwidth we're putting into it. was really kind of crescendoed in 2019, like leading into COVID, where it was really like becoming front and center to what we were doing just because of the demands of how many participants we were hosting and demands of uh, permitting and all these different things. So it
Sure.
became such a, it really did kind of ramp up to being front and center. And then COVID obviously changed all those rhythms, and I was able to kind of retreat back into my profession and focus on that. And then as things have come roaring back, it's like slowly creeping into being, taking more of our time and more of our bandwidth again. So Sherry's background is in accounting. And
Okay.
so over the years, she's had either, full-time employment as an accountant and other times doing contract work. And then same with myself in that I've had a lot of flexibility in my employment over the last dozen years or so, for sure. Up until 2012, I was a project manager for a commercial construction company. And around the time that we added races and we were doing more, I left that and became self-employed with a few different businesses. One being in technology, graphic design, and website development and such, which I've actually started to migrate away from the last 5 or 6 years to a little bit. And then I work for an ecological restoration firm as a field technician. So,
Okay.
and I have a lot of flexibility with that work, and some of it's seasonal to an extent.
Yeah, I'm going to quickly go back on the whole graphic design aspect of it, because back in 2016 when I ran, I think that was sort of a big thing was the t-shirts. And I remember you came up with the designs, and I mean, how involved are you with all that still?
Pretty much 100%. Yeah, for the most part. And it's actually on my to-do list to get to the point, let my pride and ego go enough to the point where maybe I'll just like let someone else design some stuff for us. But
Sure.
I was into doing art as early as I could remember and really kind of followed that passion throughout my life, art and music and all different things like that. And
Sure.
so once I started directing on my first race in 2008, it was like this awesome opportunity to like take some of my artwork that no one really probably cared about otherwise and put it on a t-shirt and force them to pay attention and to care. So yeah, I've tried to like always do something a little bit different than maybe what you would get for, especially years ago, normal
Yeah.
race swag. There very rarely does it say the word run on a shirt. Never has there been a silhouette of a runner on a shirt. Almost never is there a date. As much as we appreciate our sponsors, we don't fill up the back with sponsor
Sure.
logos. Not that there's anything wrong with all those types of shirts. I have a drawers and drawers full of them from races that I've participated in, but I always tried to do something a little bit different. So,
Yeah.
and when we started directing more races and it was taking more of our time and bandwidth, like I said, it was something that I could really kind of start to pursue in concert with that. So I was doing websites and graphic designs, client
Sure.
work, and had my own business doing that. And it really was one of the things, along with a bunch of other extreme actions that we took that allowed us to direct as many races as we did, especially starting, back 12, 15 years ago. And so, yeah, it's always been a nice compliment to
Yeah, I
everything I'm.
remember. I think I still have mine from back in 2016, and it was kind of a natural color with a black print, which was very cool. So, moving away from that a little bit, let's talk about you as a runner. You had said something about you're a spiritual being, and I think that ties so much into trail running for a lot of us. So, how did you get into trail running, and what was that transition like? What brought you into trail running?
I had this strange compulsion ever since I can remember, since I was a very, very little kid. As early as I was allowed to like leave the house and go out into the neighborhood on my own, that I would always go far and wide, whether it was on foot or a big wheel or a bike. I was always really into going somewhere and
Sure.
seeing things. And so that just kept up year after year as I got older. The complexion of that changed. And then the inspiration for like just running or running as a sport. My sister is a few years older than me, and she was on the cross country running team. And she was in the summer. I can remember the first summer she did it. She had to go out and like train, and I would see her getting up and putting on shiny running tights and putting her hair in a ponytail and going out for a run, and she'd come back and that was that. It was day after day, and I drew inspiration from that and took that as an example. And maybe around the time I was 10 years old or so was maybe the
Yeah.
first time that I ever did that, just to see what that was like or what that felt like.
Sure.
Um, and then I had a little bit of a tumultuous early teens, disciplinary things at school and run-ins with the law and usage of chemicals and all kinds of things. And one of the things that like kind of was still just barely anchoring me was athletics, skateboarding and running in particular. So around the age of 14, I actually started running like pretty consistently, and
Sure.
it was just on my own. I had a neighbor up the street that was into running, did some running with him, and by the time I was 15, I was training for my first marathon, and then ended up running my first marathon when I was 16 years old.
Gotcha. When did ultras? I was looking at just your results to kind of educate myself, and looks like you had your first official ultra, the Duluth 100K, I believe, was it in
Yeah,
2004? Is
yeah,
this
yeah, Edmund Fitzgerald 100K.
okay?
In 2004. Yeah, Wild Duluth, which is a great race in Duluth, Minnesota. That didn't come until a little bit later, but yeah, in 2004, yeah, I ran marathons from 90 real consistently, like twice a year from 1996 until 2003, which during that period, that was like a lot of marathons.
Yeah.
If you recall, is like, most people ran one marathon a year, and if you were really getting crazy, you were running two. And some people thought that that was too many at the time, or
Sure.
in the pro world, if someone was doing two or three, that was just outlandish. So I consistently ran two marathons a year until 2003, and then something in 2002, maybe even 2001. I'd get done with the people I was training with, we were just doing an extraordinary number of long runs for the type of marathoning we were doing. It was like we were running marathons anywhere from, if we were not training a ton or not really focusing, maybe you'd run a 3:30 or a 3:20, but then dipping under 3 hours. But we were doing like, maybe we were doing 30 or 40 long runs a year, like over 18 miles or over
Sure.
20 miles. And pretty soon we were running marathons to train for marathons. And I just kind of had this growing desire to run further, but
Yeah.
I really wasn't familiar with what ultra marathon was, or that there was even really such a thing existed. And so once it had kind of cemented, like, I'm going to do something that's longer than this, I kind of went out to seek what that even could be, and then found out about a couple of races just through word of mouth in my area that like kind of fit that bill, and that Edmund Fitzgerald 100K was one of them.
Okay. Were you primarily on roads, or were you kind of going back and forth road and trails, or what was it about trail running that just totally?
I was probably most commonly running roads, just because of because of where I live, the characteristics of my day-to-day existence. It like just made the most sense to put on shoes and go run on a road. But, I live with like the community that I grew up in and still live in is right on the edge of like urban versus rural. So there's county parks with trails and there's gravel roads. And so, yeah, I was probably, kind of on an even mix of a lot of that. And the first ultra I did was a road ultra, which, during that period, like in the early 2000s, Edmund Fitzgerald was it was on its way out, but it was one of the kind of oldest and most historic road ultras in the country. It had hosted the national championships, and one year even hosted the world championships for
Nice.
100-kilometer racing. And so it had a lot of lore in our area. And once I even established what it was and found out that it was a thing, it was the thing that I was going to do. And it was a road race. And yeah, I participated in it. My first time, yeah, it was, like you said, either 2003 or 2004.
Yeah. So just kind of stalking ultra sign up and your results. I mean, you're still actively racing. You are still performing at a pretty fast pace and knocking out 100-mile distances, and it's 21 years of racing. What's the motivate? Like, what keeps you motivated? Because I feel like after a decade or so, and also because the sport's changed so much, what is it that keeps you going back? You had mentioned you're not racing at the same level as you were, but you're still putting in 3 to 4 ultras a year. So talk to me about that a little bit.
Yeah, when I found running in the first place, it had no tinge or air, whiff of competition or times or pursuit. I think I ran my first I think I ran my first 5 years of marathoning, a couple marathons a year without a watch even. Eventually got a Timex and eventually was doing so much running that it was like, not that it was boring, but it just became an option to go, well, I'll see if I can run faster or break this time or do this thing. But my number one sole motivator or purpose for running is that it's just the simplest form of meditation. So that's why it's something that is still front and center for me to this day. And there's weeks, especially with race directing, as you know, I've run one time in the last month because I put all my time and energy into something else.
Yeah.
And now I'll enter a period where maybe next week I'll run 100 miles. I don't know. That's kind of the benefit of having grown up doing this. Like, from the time my body developed to now, that's just what my body has done. And so, it's just a natural thing. And it's the easiest thing in the world to do, compared to stressful work or family problems or trauma or things going on in the world. It's running a 200-mile ultra or whatever is infinitely easier than living an hour in Gaza. So it's entertainment, it's fun, it's meditation, it's competition. It really scratches a lot of itches.
Okay. Well, so 21 years of racing, some multiple years of competitive racing in there. I was kind of noticing you've kind of stuck with your general Wisconsin, Minnesota area with a race here and there thrown in, Missouri, Arizona, and Wyoming. Bighorn seems to be your favorite. Was there never an urge to expand, go check out something outside of where you're at regionally? And then also, just kind of looking at it, you tend to favor a lot of very cold winter ultras. Why is that?
Well, the travel thing. So yeah, you referenced like running Bighorn, and that's like a more recent development. So like over 20 years ago, I first heard about Hard Rock, and I heard about it on what was called the Big List. Has anyone ever told you about the Big List?
You know what? I'm not sure. Was that one of the old pages maintained? I don't even know who maintained it. But yes, I do.
So like when ultra running started to first flirt with the internet, it was the main resource was what was called the Big List, and it was like a Yahoo group listserv, which is like an email digest. So you just go into your email and then you look at I don't remember exactly how it worked, but I can remember over 20 years ago. Yeah, we're like 23 years ago, maybe more than that, first seeing images of a race called Hard Rock. And I mean, I hadn't heard of hardly any ultra races, but I saw this on there and I was like, I would love to do that someday.
Yeah.
But I was young. My daughter was just born. I was 19 years old, 18 years old. My daughter was just born. I was flat broke, had no money, no resources. Sure. Traveling from like my hometown to Duluth, Minnesota, which is just a few hours north, was like super extravagant. Like that was a wild thing to do. And then I just got so busy with life and things happening that like I'm literally now just getting around to qualifying for Hard Rock because I have like 4 races that have been on my bucket list for ever since, over 20 years ago. But I didn't have the resources or time or bandwidth or ability to think about like traveling like that to race. So I'm like getting on that journey now, whereas I probably could have just signed up 20 years ago.
Would have been a lot easier to get in.
Yeah. And so there, that's part of it. And I do travel quite a bit, but I don't always race when I travel. Like if I go to the I've done the rim to rim to rim many times. It's not a race. It's just somewhere I can go and run. And then the other piece of that, as far as like not doing a lot of different races, for me, it's like, I love to race and see beautiful scenery when I'm racing, but so much of it is more of inner exploration and a meditation that I can really do it anywhere. It doesn't need to be extravagant or fancy. And then on top of it, I just absolutely love our local scene and community and races that we have around here. So I'm not compelled to, travel far and wide to race unnecessarily.
Yeah. So now talking about chasing Hard Rock, what about Western States? And then also tell me about you'd mentioned 4 races that you kind of your bucket list races. What are those?
Yeah, Western really isn't a bucket list race. I really appreciate what it is and where it kind of sits in the sport or in ultra running. I think it's really cool and unique. And I like that. I really love the history of it. One of the things that, I try not to brag about anything really, but one of the things I do brag about, and I write it in all my emails, like Superior 100, the 10th
Yeah.
oldest 100-mile trail race that we were fortunate enough to be the stewards of at this point in time. So I really like that history and such. But yeah, Western just personally doesn't call to me. Would really require, for a person like me, would really require a lot of training, probably just to make that 30-hour cutoff. So I don't really train. Like when I do a 100-mile trail race now, I pretty much walk them, maybe do 5 or 6 hours of running over 30 hours, and you can't do that at Western, obviously. Yeah, just not really for me, but I do enjoy kind of armchair watching, seeing that from afar. No, comrades in South Africa.
Yeah.
One of my bucket lists for 20 years. The history, culture, all those kinds of things draw me to that as a concept. Hard rock, because hard rock's a walking race, and I'm not too shabby at altitude. So like that one, I think I would have a shot at finishing. Plus, I really love the San Juans. Pikes Peak Marathon, which just took place yesterday, and I was signed up for, but I was absolutely just too destroyed after directing Superior that I decided not to travel out there and do it.
Was that the first time you had signed up for it?
It was the first time, and I don't now I don't even know what I was thinking. I should have known better, but it was kind of wishful thinking. I thought, well, maybe if I thread the needle just right. And there's a couple other things on there, Mount Marathon in Alaska, just the short historic trail race up there. So a few things like that, but yeah, nothing too crazy on my bucket list. I've done a lot, and yeah, pretty happy and content to run my local races for the most part.
Yeah. So what's the draw with the cold? I mean, what is it with cold weather and you?
I grew up spending a lot of time outside in Minnesota, and so it's my natural habitat.
Gotcha.
I'm not comparing myself to Killian, but Killian's natural habitat is the mountains.
Yeah.
And someone that grew up in SoCal, they probably feel perfectly at home running Badwater, whatever it is, and it's just what makes sense to me. I started a winter camp, like going on winter camping trips when I was 16 years old, and then I worked construction for my late teens and into my 20s all season long out in the cold. So it's like that's all just second nature to me. And then the whole reason I ever got involved in that in the first place is my friend Pierre Oster, who had done quite a few of the races. He'd done Iditarod, and so sitting in Alaska, which is the birthplace of that type of racing, was the person to create a analogous race here in northern Minnesota, which is a perfect place to do it. The time of the year that it's held, the Arrowhead 135, being my friend and him looking for people just to simply show up and do it. That's how I got involved with that race. And
Gotcha.
It's just kind of an annual event that I do. And again, if you forced me to, if you took away my ski or trekking poles and told me I had to run it, I probably wouldn't do it. But I go out there with some trekking poles and on certain year snowshoes, and you walk from point A to point B, and it's a pretty interesting.
Yeah, past years it's become kind of a cult race, where you have the same set and it's a grinder, of course, with everything else that's involved.
Yeah, does something like that appeal to you? You're a pretty well-rounded runner doing a lot of different things, and I'm guessing you've probably done one of the 200-mile races.
I have not. That somehow just does not. The farthest I've run is 27 miles.
Well, that's pretty far. That's only 8 miles less than Arrowhead. So.
Yeah,
and
but
I think it's pretty cold.
Winter.
It's cold in Missouri.
I cannot do. I grew up in India. I'm a hot weather person. Cold will just kill me. But I appreciate the nudge. Now let's dial into Rocksteady Racing. You're the founder and race director. Give me a quick snippet into how Rocksteady Running was born. What was the drive there? And how you actually even got into race directing.
Yeah, the Rocksteady Running, those two words and the concept and the associated artwork and all that all kind of came later. I was basically, as soon as I started running trail races and ultra races, I started volunteering pretty much right out of the gate. I was really, like I mentioned, I didn't even know there was a race longer. And so I started asking people in my community if they knew of anything. And it turns out some people from my community had done this relay race in northern Minnesota that had an ultra component. And then I was like, well, has anyone done it? No, none of us have done it in the solo. Some crazy people from wherever, Minneapolis or wherever they are that have done it. And I literally got phone numbers of like 2 people and I called them on the phone like, hi, this is me. I'm interested in this. I've heard you've done this. Can you tell me about it? And those first couple of connections I made, one was a woman by the name of Sue Olson, who, if you read any of like the late 90s, early 2000s ultra running books, Sue's name always comes up. Sue Olson, Sue Ellen Trapp. She was, always named right along those people. She was big into 24, 48, and 72-hour racing and was really kind of a legend around here and in the US. And she schooled me and gave me all kinds of information. Then I met another person, a guy by the name of Scott Wagner, who was directing a race called the Afton Trail Run, which is in a state park that's literally right down the street from my home, that I never knew there was this race taking place there. And so he told me about all the races you could do, and he told me about his race. I fell in with them right away. I went on group training runs and did the fat asses they were putting on, then signed up for the race and volunteered in the weeks leading into and volunteered after and cleaned up gear and did all those things that so many of us in the sport do. And it was just kind of part and parcel. It was like, bam, bam, like I'm running trails and ultras with these people and I'm volunteering. And now this is what I do. And quickly I learned, at least, and I think this was a trend nationally, but I can speak locally, is that you had these really awesome, high level, dedicated people who usually had good jobs and were good at their jobs and organized people. And then they were also the people directing these races.
Yeah.
But it was like those people were burning the candle at both ends, like basically burning themselves out because they're running ultras, they're working their careers, and then they're directing races. And then, 4 or 5 years, and it's like hands in the air, like, I got to be done doing this. My life's falling apart and I can't direct this race again next year. And so that's how I took over the first race that Sherry and I directed was the Afton Trail Run. And the first year we directed it was in 2008, after having volunteered at a lot of races leading into that period over a 4 or 5 year period. So, and then from there was all the people in our local community that were putting on races. Like they were like, oh, there's like blood in the water. Here's this younger even in 2004, 5, 7. If you're under the age of 40 and you're ultra running, it was already kind of an oddball thing. And so here's this young, motivated person that took on this race. Maybe they'll take this race off our hands or do this. And the leap from doing one race to 2 races was like a major decision point, because I don't have a very good governor or a very good sense of like when enough is enough. So even with this one race and then my career at the time, I was like putting so much time and effort and energy just into the one race that it was already pretty disruptive to our lifestyles. But we were doing a really good job with the race and we loved doing it. And so when a few other friends came knocking, like thinking about getting out of this, it was like a really big decision and inflection point, and really took some careful consideration to go from that one race to 2 races, because that, as I'm sure that the whole paradigm starts to change, right?
Oh yeah. So how many races does Rocksteady currently host? And I know Superior 100 is 35 years in, something like that. So that's the oldest running. How did Superior come to being?
Well, we were talking about Harry Sloan earlier, or we were talking about Western states earlier, and a fella from northern Minnesota named Harry Sloan had run Western a few times. At the same time, this is like in the late 1980s, at the same time, a hiking trail was being developed in northern Minnesota called the Superior Hiking Trail. So Harry, had a light bulb go off and thought, well, we're going to do the western states of Minnesota on the north shore of Lake Superior in northern Minnesota. Point to point 100-mile race, and so it's going to be the western states of Minnesota. And he created the race kind of just out of the ether with a handful of helpers, and started putting the race on just shortly after the hiking trail was first established. So he directed the race for X number of years, 5 to 7 years. Each director before Sherry and I had done it in the kind of the 5 to 7 year range. And I've link all the way back to Harry, and I'm in touch with him. But I took the race over from a gentleman named Larry, who did the race for 5 to 7 years and kind of, ran his course with the event, and through a bunch of life circumstances needed to be done doing it. And it was one of several other races that we inherited and are kind of we're the shepherds of at this point in time, and until we aren't anymore. And so we do 8 we do 4 trail ultra bigger races a year, and then a series of shorter running races that is 4 races throughout the summer, weeknight trail running races, 5 miles or 5K to 7 miles. So in total, it's 8 races a year, but 4 of those are part of a series, and a little bit shorter, a little smaller, a little less intensive than the 4 trail kind of ultra races that we put on.
Just spitball some of the names of the events that you're currently hosting.
Yeah, so in the spring we do the Zumbro Endurance Run. There's a 100-mile, a 50-mile, and a 17-mile loop course in southern part of Minnesota. Kind of like any other race, has its own unique flavor and cult following and weirdness and trials and tribulations and beauty. Then we do the Superior Spring Trail Race up on the North Shore on the Superior Hiking Trail. Was kind of originally added as like a training race for the 100-mile race, which takes place in the fall. We do the Afton Trail Run more in the central part of the state, in a beautiful state park in the St. Croix River Valley and National Scenic Riverway, really neat area. And then the Superior 100-mile trail race with its 2 other distances, 50-mile and marathon, each fall.
Gotcha.
And as I mentioned, we do this series called Endless Summer Trail Run Series. That's 5K to 7 miles on weeknights during the summer, which I didn't really see that coming, because when I first got into ultra running, I was already really big into marathoning. I'd hardly run races shorter than the marathon distance, and probably didn't think much or care about it that much. But that series has really become so near and dear to mine and Sherry's hearts, in that it's like such a welcoming and inclusive kind of place where it's like you don't need to be 100-mile runner to get out and run on the trails. And we really direct them in the same way that we do our other races, full-fledged race experience. Everyone kind of gets that same big experience, but it's like in a shorter trail race on a weeknight and close in, so it's real accessible to all different people from all different areas, walks of life. So it's really kind of taken on a life of its own, and we really love and appreciate being able to do those events.
With Superior, the spring edition of Superior, pretty much is the course the same? And what distance is it 50K, 50 mile?
There's a 50K, a 25K, and a 12.5K. Again, we added that later, just seeing that, like, again, probably as I've gotten older and softer, we got to make this for everybody. Not everyone needs to or should run that long. So yeah, it's a 50K. And so where you ended your race at Superior in 2016, Lutzen, the 50K basically runs out and back from there on the 100-mile race course. And so does the 25K. So they're out and backs. And then our shorter one is a point to point coming in the other direction. But yeah.
Let's dive into, so I know that your big showcase events are Superior and Zumbro. I am mildly or remotely familiar with Zumbro, and I kind of remember it always being hosted in March, and it was always freezing ass cold, because I would stalk the race. I started looking at the weather and talking to friends. I was like, I don't think I can hack it, but that's been moved to April. So talk to me a bit about Zumbro. You said it's a looped course, and then Superior. And with Superior, anybody that's been out in the area already knows it's rugged. It gets very technical. Climbs are between 3,500, sometimes 700 feet per mile, depending on where you are on the mountain. Gorgeous trail. How does that vary from Zumbro? And, what's the trail variations like?
Well, I'll lead with my marketing piece for Zumbro. We have a saying around here, and it's Zumbro, just don't do it. That's the tagline.
Yeah.
I'm actually thinking about a t-shirt next year that says that. Zumbro is like a mind bender, in that it's in this area. It's called the Richard Dorr Memorial Hardwood Forest. And so Minnesota has multiple biomes. So like the southern part of the state is kind of like grasslands. Like, you're going on a road trip out west and you start going through Montana and Wyoming, and there's these big vistas and grasslands. Well, that's southern Minnesota. Then you have the central part of the state, which is like these gorgeous kind of hauntingly just beautiful hardwood forests.
Yeah.
That's where Zumbro is. And then you get to the northern part of Minnesota and it's in like boreal forests, like think Canada, think Alaska, think, way, way up north. And so there's they're really different in that sense. Zumbro was actually born in the same way that Superior was, in that Harry wanted to put the western states of Minnesota on the Superior Hiking Trail in northern Minnesota. Well, Larry, different guy who lived down south, this is the place that he would go to train, and he ran Western, he ran Massanutten, and it was just his home training grounds, right? And so in the early 2000s, he would just invite his friends out in the spring to go for a run, cook brats by the fire, whatever. It was what, I don't even know. I'm so out of ultra running as far as like following websites or magazines or what people say. I don't know if people are using the word fat ass anymore. Maybe it's not even appropriate to say anymore. I don't know.
Around.
We're still allowed. Oh, cool. So
The cool kids use it,
All right, cool. I used to host quite a few fat asses, and I don't anymore because I'm like, I just have my hands full with everything, and I'm leaving it to a different generation. And there's still some stuff going on, and that's good. But Larry had started Zumbro as a fat ass, and we would just all go and run and eat brats and whatever, and there'd be 20 of us there. And now it's a race. I mean, the last year before the pandemic, I think we had like nearly 1,000 people signed up. It was crazy.
Yeah, that's a big number.
But it's too early in the year, and it's subject to like a snow or blizzard cancellation. With the way the permits work, it's a big hunting area. It's not a state park, so it's not like infrastructure. It's basically, they do forestry. They either do logging down there or else people hunt there. And so no one cares about your recreation. It's like, if you can find a little window to do your recreation, you go ahead. But otherwise, we're hunting and we're logging.
Yeah.
So we have like 2 weeks a year that like we could, legitimately, reasonably host a race. And it happens to be in this kind of early spring bad weather window.
Yeah.
All that said, it's not as much climbing as Superior. It's not as much climbing as a lot of races. You're talking more like 14,000 feet of climbing, 13,000 feet of climbing, something in that range. But a lot of it's sand, and then it's rubbly and sandy, and it's just a really hard course. So some people think I'm going to go run that as my first 100 because it's loops, a little easier, not as much vert, and then you just find out absolutely how grisly that race is. So like I said, it's like a lot of races. Like, one person may not care about it. It's never gonna, no one outside of Minnesota or our area is probably really ever going to talk about it, but it has like this cult following here, kind of just grisly and miserable and great and interesting all at the same time, that there's a lot of people from here that really like it. And as we actually had a couple of cancellations with weather, Sherry and I were like throwing our hands up, like, what are we going to do with this thing? It's just a nightmare all around. And really the resounding thing from the running community is like, keep doing it, like, it's canceled, whatever, just keep putting it on. And we love it. So we're still pretty jazzed on it.
So with Superior, since you took over as race director, how much has that course changed, if you will? Have you had reroutes that you need to do? From what I understood and having run it, it's primarily on the Superior Hiking Trail, which is beautiful. And what do the permits look like? Just briefly touch on that for me. And, logistics, because it's a point-to-point race.
From the kind of race directing, running nerd standpoint, like all the things that I guess I would point out about it is that, and at one point, I think this was really unique, and I think it's still kind of unique, in that we have the race weekend has 3 different distances, one of them being 100, all 3 of them being point to point. And I don't think that's very common. At least a long time ago, I don't even know if there was any other races that had that, and it makes it really logistically challenging to produce. But it also does a bunch of really neat things, in that it's like, it creates a really neat experience because of those factors. Like, no matter which distance it's in, you're not doing the same thing twice. Sure. You're getting to see as much terrain as possible within that given distance. It gives a neat opportunity for, while it can be an annoyance at some races where you're like intermingled with other runners, as the 100-milers getting overtaken by energetic 26-milers late in a race, whatever, but it also creates some really neat opportunities for community and everyone kind of in there doing the same thing. When Superior was first founded, there was road segments to it. I listened to your episode with Ian Torrance, like I mentioned. He was actually one of the early winners, and actually has the course record on the old courses of Superior but that actually had a lot of road in it because when they
Sure.
first devised the Superior Hiking Trail, it was the idea was this point to point long distance hiking trail, but like a lot of trails start, they don't have all those trail segments right off the bat. You're connecting in with roads or gravel roads, paved roads, whatever. But over the years, yeah, we have a contiguous 310, 15-mile trail in northern Minnesota. So it's basically 100% trail race. Some years in more recent history, you've used a few mile paved segment to spread people out. But and then as a result, you're going, we're going through 2 counties, we're going through 4 or 5 state parks. So yeah, the permitting gets requisitely complicated in that you're permitting with the U.S. Forest Service, you're permitting with the Department of Natural Resources, but that encompasses multiple state parks and even state land that's not part of state parks, and then dealing with multiple counties. And then it's not the most remote race in the world. Like you can go and do races, out west that are really truly in a remote location. We're usually within pretty good proximity to the kind of main thoroughfare or highway that runs up the North Shore of Minnesota. Now, you don't hear the road. You feel like you're really remote, but if you know the area, you're not super remote. So as a result, our trailheads sometimes are real close to communities or, small mining towns or whatever. So we have not just the permitting aspects, but just the notification aspects, and then really being responsible stewards of, the couple of days that we're coming through, that we're being really cognizant of traffic control and all those kinds of things. So yeah, I think the permitting situation with those races is only a fraction of the story, in that you're also just having to be really careful and really conscientious about how you're bringing the race through and creating safety and all those kinds of things with putting a lot of people into small spaces. So we've tried to do a good job of that, and I think we have. So
yeah, no, I would agree. How many permits are you having to secure them every year, or can you get 5-year permits through Forest Service and then there are other permits you have to kind of go in every year?
Yeah, we've been really fortunate in that we have such a strong working relationship with our forest, which that's the whole ball game, right? I know that, last couple of years, especially with social media and alternative news outlets for running, you start hearing these, stories of, well, the Forest Service this, and this isn't fair. And this is, it's like a lot of that is, granted, there's some overarching, laws and statutes that dictate how these permits and how these things are going to unfold, even at the regional level. But ultimately, like anything else, things are based on relationships, and it can be as difficult or as easy based on, what is your relationship, your working relationship, your history, how diligent you are about putting together the information. So yeah, we're really fortunate to have been on a consecutive 5-year permits, and maybe that changes. I don't know, just based on what things are happening nationally, but we've been really fortunate to have that. But yeah, it's a relatively intensive process, and like anything else with directing an event, just trying to be super conscientious and really respecting the people's time that you're working with, getting them the information, timely manner, putting together the information so people don't have to go digging. All that stuff really seems to go a long ways. Yeah, I have multi-year, decades-old relationships with a lot of the people that we work with. And then we're working with the Superior Hiking Trail Association and the Forest Service and the state parks kind of in a whole different context, in that we do a lot of trail work and trail work initiatives, both on the trail segments that our races are on, but we also work, a group of us that are both runners and volunteers involved with our races, just did a big trail work project that wasn't even on the hiking trail, just adjacent, a different segment of trail nearby. And so that's really kind of a big ethos and part of our mission, and what we're doing is to give back to our trail systems.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question, was trail maintenance, especially with, point of 100 and having to cover, and, Forest Service doesn't always have the manpower to do it. How often are you guys organizing these trail initiatives? And I know, in the past years, it's become more of like, hey, you've got to go out and do trail work. If you were to tell anybody who's listening the importance of that.
The importance is that it's nourishing your heart and your soul to go out and work on the trails. It's like, as much as I love to go run on a trail, the satisfaction I feel and what I get out of a day of trail work over a day of running is, I don't know, it's exponential, because you're accomplishing a bunch of things, right? You're physically getting a workout, which, people like us need that just to feel normal, right? And then you're improving a resource that allows all these other people to go out and use regardless of a race. At the same time, you're benefiting your event in a way that allows, your event to thrive and flourish. From a political point of view, it looks good when you're out there taking care of the trails and doing the right thing, right? So it's just kind of this, and then, like I said, one of the best things is you're working side by side with other people that, maybe this project that, I just take this project that we worked on earlier in the year, building a really nice section of boardwalk and doing some new trail leading in and out of it, so on and so forth. There was runners there that are front of the pack runners winning races, and was runners there that are back of the pack runners that would basically never even interact at a race, because by the time this person's coming to the finish, this person's probably cleaned up and gone home. So it's just a really neat way for us people to come together and interact in a different way. So super important to do on a personal level, on a political level, and then just overall for the resource, so everyone can enjoy the trails. And that's one of the beautiful things. I mean, our land managers, our trail association, all the people we work with, I think once in a while, like, scratch your heads, like, how do you show up? How do you keep showing up? How do you get as much done as you do? How do you get as much done as you do without getting hurt? And it's like, that's a superpower of being an ultra marathoner, is that you can go out and work a 12-hour day swinging a Picmatic or a Pulaski, and then you can come back and do it the next day. And as long as someone gives you some water and some calories, you're going to keep going, and you're going to like it. So it's been one of my great pleasures to bring people into that world and to do those things. As a result, like, we don't have a trail work requirement for our races. We don't have a volunteer requirement for our races. One of the reasons for that is that's our culture here.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like the way we present it, and not really a negotiable. It's just, this is what you do. It's a norm, and it was modeled to me, and we model it to others. And so I'm a big fan of attraction rather than promotion, and I'm a big fan of culture over rules. And so that goes right down to the trail work or the volunteerism or whatever. It's just like, this is what we do, and if you want to do it, do it. And if you don't want to do it, you're probably you're missing out on something. So that's kind of the lens with which we try to frame it up.
Sure. Give me a quick snippet into the lottery process for Superior, because if I'm remembering correctly, I think it was either 2017 or 18 that Superior went lottery. So just, why that was, and then also, what the process is like briefly. Is it across all distances, or is it primarily for 100 miles and 50?
Yeah, if I had to venture a guess, it was maybe 2015 or 16 that it was officially instituted.
Okay.
But again, I'm off a year or two from time to time. I would say that when we went to a lottery for both our spring and our fall races, because it is for both the Superior Spring Trail Race and the Superior Fall Trail Race, it was probably pretty similar to what Kettle Moraine's been going through the last few years, and finally threw up their hands and said, mercy, no more, time to go to a lottery. We took absolutely no pleasure in moving it to a lottery, because one of the absolute last things we're trying to do with anything with what we're doing here is being exclusive or exclusivity. And it can be really a quote unquote cool thing you can do if you've gone to a lottery. You can say, look how great our race is, we've gone to a lottery. And then you can hype it and you can push it, and then you can get more interest. It's in marketing, it's called perceived scarcity or perceived scarcity, right? And so it kind of pained us to go that route. But what was happening is, how you a bunch of people clicking on fast fingering the button, still Crash Ultra sign up to this day. Well, before then, we operated our own registration platform. So when I directed my first race, it was mail-in forms, data entry into a spreadsheet, right? And I was like, this is after the first year, I was like, we're not doing this thing. This is horrible. So we looked at something called active.com, the only registration platform you could go to, sign a contract with, run your registration through. I thought being a designer, I thought the UI and the UX on it was so horrible that I was like, I'm going to build my own. So we built a registration platform. Yeah. And for the first number of years, you register for our races through our registration platform. Well, the last 2013, 2014, it was crashing our registration platform. And then come to find out there wasn't really platforms robust enough to handle the traffic, right? So anyways, we went to that because of that. It was becoming, like I said, it was becoming a fast finger contest. If you work nights and you didn't have access, if you worked in a factory at nights, I know there's not a lot of people that work factories at nights, but there are, you couldn't sign up for the race. If you had to get your kids off to school and you couldn't be there at 9 a.m. clicking on the thing, too bad, And so demand was high enough that it warranted it. And so we went to that for both our spring and our fall races. And our races in the spring and fall are pretty big. The combined field limits are just under 1,000 participants, and we still have too much demand, right? So we do have it for all 3 spring distances, all 3 fall distances. In the spring, the longest distance is they're actually coming pretty even. In the fall, the 100 is by far and away more popular. So is the marathon, actually. Then the 50 is a little less popular. Yeah. Like I said, with our 50 miler, it's like all the pain, but not quite all the glory of running the 100. So then it's like, I should run the marathon and spare myself this suffrage. Our thing new this last couple of years, because you get people that want to know and they want you to answer like how many people and this and that. We took a hard stance from the beginning, like that's not what we're doing here. If you want to run Superior, put your name in the lottery. If you don't get in, you'll probably get in a year or two. This last couple of years, I had put a thing on our website because I started hearing, just in the last few years, I started hearing from a few people. I tried to get in 3 times. If someone hasn't, anyone listening to this podcast, if you haven't gotten into Superior 3 times, email me. We'll get you in. Well, we're going to do everything in our power to get you into Superior, because it doesn't need to be this 10-year. We don't want people on a 10-year journey trying to get into a race. It's like, and it makes perfect sense. A race like Hard Rock can only allow 128 people or whatever it is, and 5,000 people applying. It's going to take you 10 years. Sure. If I apply for 10 years for Hard Rock and don't get in, God bless them and God bless me. I'll go do a soft rock and I'll have a big smile on my face either way. So again, Kettle this year, it sounds like they finally had enough. Like I'm sure what they were going through is what we were going through. Is it enough demand to justify? Isn't it? But really ultimately it was like, for Kettle, it probably was. For us, it was creating a poor experience. It was you were trying to get in, you couldn't get in. Then the thing was sold out. Now you can't get in at all. Now your feelings are hurt. It wasn't fair. It's like, what's fair is like, if you really want to do this race, plan on it. Try to get in. If you don't get in, try again. Do another race. Do your local race. It all seems to work pretty well. But again, a lot of that just comes back to culture too. More than almost anything else.
So going back to, the culture, I feel like, again, lottery, and then you talk about race directing, so much of it is people management. Would you say people management is probably the best and the worst component of race directing?
Best. Just best.
Yeah.
No worse.
Elaborate on that for me.
I just, I get that. Like, people, I think in society, we're running around in the places we go, like going to Walmart isn't always that, like, it's not an uplifting experience, right? Especially if you live in maybe a really populous area and you got to go to Walmart. So I got to fight traffic and I got to go through 9 stoplights and I get in the freeway and I get to Walmart and it's jammed with all these people. And there's all this humanity that just, you're in their way, they're in your way. I just need to get this done. Well, like, I just think in ultra running and trail running, we have an opportunity to just be in communion with some of the greatest people on planet Earth. And so even if they come with some shortcomings, or even if they didn't read all the information, they have a dumb question, they're all such great people. That's what we find. I mean, in all my years of doing this, we came across a couple of people that were real assholes. Yeah. Most of them, they just don't make it in a pursuit like ultra running, because that's not really how it works. It's not compatible, I don't think, on just so many levels. And then even a couple of those people that really had, over the years, 1 or 2 people that we had some bad interactions with or conducted themselves really poorly at a race, the ones that stuck around, we're all okay, the moves were made and things are okay. So no, I would say we love our people. We prefer that they read everything and follow the norms and rules. And when and again, I go back to culture. It's like, when something gets built brick by brick, it's really solid. Now, I can imagine, and I believe there's ways nowadays that you could throw something together haphazard and maybe build something really quickly and really maybe use some marketing tricks to get a bunch of people to show up and quote unquote build a community. Right. But community has norms. And so and it has some expectations and some give and take. And so once that's built in, and we're fortunate to have that, and a lot of communities throughout the country are lucky to have that in their trail and ultra communities, that like it's pretty copacetic, for the most part. So sorry, long answer. Good. No complaint.
Fine.
And one of my things is I'm like probably part of the problem with my last answer. I'm so verbose, and we put so much information on our website that like eventually, the answers are there. And so, a lot of times we're not getting a lot of people bugging us about things because they can get to the information,
Yeah.
And that's the thing, is that when I hear race directors saying, I'm like, well, is the information available? Is it available? And was it put together well? Was it presented in a way that everyone can access and understand? And it's like, I just think that if we're having those problems, it's probably something that we're deficient in more than what another person is deficient in.
Sure.
At least that's the way I try to look at it.
Yeah. Well, before we wrap things up, I want to touch on when I was there in 2016, I think the community aspect of Superior was just mind-blowing for me. There's literally a handful of races, 100-milers that I've run that I can say where there are so many old-timers. I mean, it's like people just show up, whether they're finishing or not. They've been around the event for 30 plus years. And Superior has that. I hate to put it in a bracket and say it's such a cult event, but it really does draw in so many old timers. Let's start with, do you off the top of your head remember the longest runner, or the runner who's run Superior the longest in all your years, and why do you think that is? I mean, I know some of it is the race directors and the community that's built around it, but what is it about just your personal, I guess, opinion of it that
I do know who it is. It's Susan Donnelly and Stuart Kolb, tied at 2,300-mile finishes at Superior.
Yeah, and I know both of them.
Yeah, of course you do. Yeah, where you're located. Because Susan's always, Susan is like, Minnesota, I think, is her first adopted part of the country, and then her second, I think, is down by you guys.
Yeah.
3 Days of Selmo and Noah's Ark and all those different things. I know she has a lot of love for down there. Minnesota has a really, really long, storied running tradition, period. So not just trail and ultra, but just running in general. A lot of, if you talk on the competitive end, a lot of professional runners, a lot of Olympians, just the two easiest names to pick out of the ether, Courtney Dauwalter and Scott Jurek, Minnesota. Right. And then if you just start going down the list, just runner after runner. So there's this really strong distance running, in particular, distance running tradition in Minnesota. And so like our road marathons, our running clubs, so there's just a lot of running history and tradition here. And then a couple of our ultras are pretty old, Superior being the 10th oldest. We have a race called the Voyager 50-mile race, which started in like 83. Pretty old. So there's some real history in the trail and ultra community too. We have some really unique things with geography happening, and that like we have some really good population centers to draw on just in general for like people that want to run, people that want to volunteer. So there's a lot of that going on. And then, there is Minnesota nice, which is a real thing. Some people also think it's Minnesota passive aggressive at times. There is an element to that too. Right. But I think there is kind of a humility and a community minded focus with most of the events and a lot of the people. And it's definitely not to disparage any other part of the country or anything else. Just there's a lot of that happening. I know that within what we do, a huge focus is to one of the greatest things that's happened in ultra running over the last 20 years is it's gotten younger and younger, and it's gotten more and more diverse. Yeah. And so so anytime you hear the conversation like old school, new school, is it better? Do you like where the sport's going? It just all makes my head spin, because all I can think is it's still fringe, it's still counterculture, it's still punk rock. And the beauty of it is it's becoming open to more and more people. And that means it's becoming open to more and more people who at a time that people really, really need it, young people really need an alternative to online. And so as we get the new blood coming in, I know within our organization and within other races in our area, there's this always a tip of the hat to the old guard at the same time.
Yeah.
Like, so for instance, when we mark trail for Superior, we do it on Thursday before the race. And a long time ago, there were so few people around just engaging the sport. Maybe 7 or 8 or 10 of us would go out and mark 100 miles of trail, and we do it in one day, and you're doing these monster 20-mile sections. Nowadays, we have 41, 43, 45 people. They show up on Thursday, and we go out and mark 100 miles of trail. So now you have 3 people on a segment, and you're doing a shorter section of trail, and you're getting it all marked in a day. At our trail marking event this year, we had people in their 20s, and we had people just shy of 80. Yeah. So the people just shy of 80, maybe they're not carrying the markers. Maybe they're not doing the longest segments, but they're marking this trail for 20 years.
Yeah. That's pride.
I'll show you how to do this, right? And so it's like any other community or culture. It's like you need that energy and younger people coming up, and then you need your elder statespeople who can, model for and pass down. And I think there's just a really good tradition of that, and we're really, really lucky to have it. So, and I think when you come to Superior, that's partially what you're feeling. There's aid station captains that, again, they're in their 70s, and they've been around the race for 20, 25 years. We have an aid station captain that's been doing the same aid station since 1998. If people, ham radio operators that have done every edition of the race, 35 years, a lot of that history and tradition. And some of that is like, it's not, as you know, it's not a pleasant job all the time going back to those, knocking on those same doors. But I try to use it as like, hey, we want you and we need you here. We understand if you can't make it. We understand if 20 years was enough, but like really letting all those people know that you're wanted and valued and needed here. Yeah. Still, even if you can't run, even if you can't cover distance, but we need your spirit. So I think when you come to Superior, that's what you're experiencing.
Yeah. So. No, I would agree. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me and going into your own life and just a little bit of snippet of what it's like and where you are.
Yeah, thanks so much for doing this. I think it's so, so much of again, I don't follow a lot of running media, but I know it's so easy with ultra running we call it people call it a sport. Sometimes I call it a sport, sometimes I don't. And so then when you call it a sport, it's pretty easy to the low-hanging fruit would be do a podcast and talk about the sport and who's fast and who's doing this and who's doing that, which I think is a really important part of the sport, sport and the pursuit, and a lot of interesting stuff to delve into there. But I think there's a lot of other interesting things to explore. I think by you doing this podcast, it explores the events and ultra running and racing from a different perspective. But also, like we were just talking about, I think it kind of gives a tip of the cap to kind of what's come before too. Ian Torrance, when I first got into ultra running, I mean, oh my goodness, that's that's the pinnacle of the sport. That's and then he brings all his history and experience, and it was fun. It's been fun for me to listen to a few of your episodes so far. So thanks a lot for doing it, and keep up all the great work that you're doing.
Thank you. I appreciate it. To everyone who's tuning in to today's episode, if you'd like more information about the TURD Podcast, visit our website at Terrain Trail Runners, that's runners with an S.com, or follow us on the social media channels. Until next time, don't forget to thank your race directors. It really does keep us going.